It may not be the vacation spot in Mexico, but Cancun Mexican Restaurant will make you feel like you've made the trip. With all of your favorite Mexican dishes like tacos and fajitas, it's a guaranteed good time. And if you just can't get enough, Cancun will cater your event. We accept Phoenix Cash, and check out our menu online at CancunMexicanBurlington.com. Visit our restaurant in the Walmart Shopping Center off Huffman Mill Road. We're open Sunday through Thursday, 11 a.m. to 10 p.m., and Friday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Cancun Mexican Restaurant, the vacation college students can afford.
All right, and as you can see there, the gun control, gun violence debate is still going on. So we're going to recap a little bit before we head over to some panelists. One panelist during this forum, his name's Jeff Carpenter. He discussed the importance of a focus on gun safety. He said that if we have regulation on various types of cheeses in our country, then we certainly should have regulations for our guns.
Interesting point. Another panelist, Junior Robin French, discussed the role of media and how the wrongdoers are more focused on than the victims that they affect. French mentioned that although she knew the name of the killer responsible for Sandy Hook, she did not know any of the names of the victims other than the principal. French believes this is because the media's coverage and how we have covered the event along with others.
Which is interesting coming from us because, well, we are part of the media. So, another panelist, Jason Springer, is a member of the NRA. Springer suggested that we should look at the other issues that can lead to violence in the United States, such as video games and movies. He mentioned that guns are being specifically targeted as a problem over the past few months, but these other forms of media probably have something to do with it as well.
Sophomore Deanna Stanton talked about domestic violence that ties in with gun violence. She suggested that the use of firearms contributes to domestic violence and must be looked at much more carefully.
And Elon Police Chief Cliff Parker suggested that people on both sides of the issue are closer than they think. He suggested that students consider a position in public service and even got a little choked up while responding to Elon professor Megan Squire's story, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Right. North Carolina House of Representatives Stephen Ross listed off several overall violence statistics for the state of North Carolina. Ross talked about how drugs, domestic violence, and crimes against children are all also problems within the state and country. He said that violence happens from various sources and that we shouldn't just target one area like guns.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to head on over to our student experts who are here in the studio with our reporter Jason Puckett. So Jason, let's hear what those student experts have to say.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. While we were watching that, I was just writing down some key phrases that were brought up over and over again, and some of them were just media, the need for tougher law enforcement, healthcare system, video games, mental health, less regulation, loopholes, gender roles, and even something such as reasonable regulations. I'm joined now by John Crowder again, who's the SGA Senator for the Elon College of Arts and Sciences, and also Jack Miner, who's a member of the College Republicans. So, Jack, I know you were there for a bit, and John, you watched a lot of that. What was your overall impression, John?
My overall impression was I didn't feel like anybody was coming to any sort of grand agreements. Everyone just took their prospective sides, data mined, and didn't try to see eye to eye.
And Jack, I saw your tweets were on the hashtag, and I noticed that you were saying a lot about no one was giving a real factor as to what would cause gun violence. Do you have an answer for what you think a real factor would be?
Well, I think the problem starts with just, it's a social issue. It's not about gun control, it's about self-control. And really it comes to, we're deteriorating our social values in America. And as we push them all more to the side, then you're going to see more violence and more of these crime issues come up.
So do you feel that these issues that were brought up tonight, that they are not where the focus should be?
No. I mean, some of them touched on it, but gun violence can be caused by so many different factors. You really can't pinpoint one. It's a matter of finding the one that's going to do the most good and affect the most people. And really, where I think that starts is with pushing social values and supporting family issues and religion rather than relying on the government to take care of that.
John, how do you feel about that? Do you have a response to that?
Well, the government can only do so much, and there's a point in time when the family needs to start taking over. But I do think there are some reasonable things that the government can handle, such as installing gunfire locators in more areas so that we can hear and know what kind of gun is going off if a crime is perpetrated. That's something that I don't think a lot of people have thought about. And expanding background checks more extensively onto the internet.
Now, to both of you, Rev. McBride, he mentioned the phrase reasonable regulations a couple times, seemed to kind of hit both sides. What did you think about those? Like some things could be fixed while there were still some things being kept in place. Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. I think really the regulations that are in place now are sufficient if we can get them to become efficient. Really, we can't add on more regulations that we're not going to be able to control if we don't have the ones we already have in place set. There's already plenty of loopholes with our background checks that we need to fill before we add on new gun regulations.
John?
And I think that's a lot of what these so-called new gun laws were trying to address, was to fill in the loopholes. Like, there are at least 33 states that still have the gun show loophole. North Carolina is thankfully not one of them, but we certainly need to address that so people can't just show up to a gun show, which is basically a flea market for guns, and buy it with no questions asked.
All right, so to my knowledge, this is still going on right now. You know, we heard a lot of opinions tonight. Is there something you would have wanted to hear that wasn't brought up on either side? Either of you?
Jack?
Yeah, I would say one thing would be just genuine facts. You know, like I said, it's such a broad topic, and you can blame so many different factors on it. Really, the best story I heard was the professor here who had the personal story. And although I didn't necessarily completely agree with her opinions on the matter, you know, it's real people and real problems is how you address them. You don't find it and look at it as an overall problem. You find individual people and get their stories and find out what will help them individually, and that's how you solve the larger topic.
I feel like people didn't try to look for a third way. Mm-hmm. There's so much talk about what you hear, the typical liberal talking points, the typical conservative talking points, but no one tried to go at the gun problem or the whatever problem, societal problem, in a different way. And I thought that maybe installing more gunfire locators probably would have been a different way of attacking the issue.
Well, again, thank you both for being here. And if you guys want more information, our viewers, you can check the Twitter feed that we had. There was a hashtag going throughout the entire event. There's more information there. Ladies, back to you.
Thanks, Jason, and thank you to our panelists. Brendan McGovern is still over McKinnon where the event just ended. We watched it unfold, but we're going to check in with him now. He is with a law professor. His name is Michael Rich, and let's hear what he has to say. Brendan?
Thank you, Julie. I'm here with Professor Rich from the ELN Law School, and he spoke during the presentation about the Second Amendment. I wanted to ask you, are there any, in your legal opinion, are there any restrictions or limitations on gun rights that would be constitutional?
I mean, that's a really broad question, but if we think about the ones that have been introduced or discussed in the most recent context of most recent gun violence, really most of them do not impinge upon a person's ability to defend themselves. It really just limits the kind of arms that they might be able to have. So it seems like, given the Supreme Court's jurisprudence, those would be constitutional.
All right, well, thank you. And also, if you also mentioned that part of the meaning of the Second Amendment is to protect yourself from tyranny. Is that somewhat of an antiquated notion now in an era where the federal government, if they were to oppress the people, have tanks and predator drones and all sorts of other weaponry?
Well, certainly resisting tyranny is not an easy thing, and it's no easier now than it was hundreds of years ago. But I don't know that it makes it an antiquated notion in the sense that that the Second Amendment still is about making sure people have arms so that if the government were to try to oppress them, they could resist as best they could.
So would an assault weapons ban be considered unconstitutional?
I don't believe it would, no.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us. No, we still have some more time. I'm sorry. Okay. Apologize for that. But no, so, and reducing the size of magazines, that does not infringe on a person's ability to protect themselves.
Well, no, it certainly wouldn't seem to. I mean, the court has held that handguns are really the main way in which people protect themselves, and that's why handgun bans have been problematic. But the court seems to be pretty open to the idea of limiting, assault weapons and things like that, even if we decide that's a good idea.
Now, in urban environments, it's handguns that are the root of most of the violence, not assault weapons. So is there any way to make urban environments safer without infringing on people's constitutional rights?
I mean, that's a really good and very difficult question. I mean, when it comes to the regulation of handguns, it would seem like if we could keep the handguns out of the hands of people who legally should not have them or the most likely to be dangerous, that would be the way to do it. The question is whether or not there's an effective means to go about doing that, and that's a very hard question.
All right, well, thank you very much for joining us, Professor Rich, and thank you very much for participating in this panel. Back to you guys.
Great, thank you, and some great discussion that happened tonight. One thing I know that stands out in our minds is when Professor Megan Squire, a computer science professor, shared a story that seemed to be one of the first times she's told that story to a group of ELN students.
That was a very raw, very real moment, and it puts a face on an issue. It's not someone else with a problem in a different state, someone you don't know. This is someone we see on campus. You have her as a professor, and she has this issue. It brings it home. It makes it very real for a community like Elon that is so small.
I'd love to hear more from her as well. But, you know, a lot of great points came out of today. We just spoke to a law professor who, in his opinion, says that assault weapons ban does not go against the Second Amendment. You know, there's just a lot of discussion to have. But that's all we have today. That'll do it for this Elon Local News special broadcast of Elon's gun violence panel in McKinnon Hall. So much more to talk about. So make sure to follow us on Twitter at Elon Local News and like us on Elon Local News on Facebook.
And tune in to our normal Monday broadcast here on Channel 5, live at 6 p.m.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Julie Morris. This is Katie Marrigy. Have a great night, Elon.